Hi, I'm Dan Costa, the Chief Content Officer at Worth Media Group, and I am here at the Milken Global Conference in Los Angeles. I'm joined by Michael Dimock. He is the director and leads the Pew Research Center. Michael, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me.
Absolutely, thanks for having me.
So there are a lot of topics of conversation here at the conference, a lot of philanthropy, a lot of healthcare. There's also a lot of policy in how Americans see the country. You've done some recent research in this area, really looking at how Americans see the democratic health of the country. And I think we all intuitively know that no one has a lot of confidence in it at this point. But the thing that shocks me is that it's for all ends of the spectrum. It's on the left, it's on the right, it's through the middle. And I don't know if I've ever seen a time where people had so little faith in just the idea of democracy itself.
I think you can break it down and be more specific than that, though, where the real challenge is, and this is in the US and in other countries, is truly feeling represented. That the democratic system is taking my priorities, aggregating them up with the people around me, and really representing them in the decision-making process. And that is where the confidence lags. It's less about even the government's ability to execute on things, surprisingly, right? I mean, people do worry that governments are wasteful and inefficient, but that's not the real crux of the question. And that gets back to, how do elections work, right? What role does money play? What kind of people choose to run for office? Do they really represent me after they've won that and they have the power, and are they still listening? That's really where the anxieties are. It's acute in the US, and it is across the board, partisan-wise in the US, but it's not only the US that's facing that.
Tell me some of the data to sort of paint the picture of what's going on here, because I think that's absolutely right. That the individual grievances are less important than the overall sense that they're just not being represented, and to some extent not heard, but really, represented by the institutions themselves.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, in the US, you'd have maybe 20% who say, or less, who would say that the government listens to people like me, that my views are reflected in the decisions that are made in the government. By comparison, it's not that the public doesn't want the government to do things, right? We've asked a question that, it preceded the Pew Research Center. Do you prefer a government that is bigger and is solving more problems in the country, or a government that's smaller and getting out of the way? This has been a 50-50 country for decades, probably 4 decades, just hasn't really moved significantly. So it's not that people don't want a government to take action and to represent them, it's that they really don't believe that representational link is happening.
So let's try to explain why. You mentioned money.
Yeah.
I think that has had a huge impact. Just unregulated, unfettered financial contributions on both sides.
Right.
Changes the way people see elections, and certainly changes the narrative for how citizens feel, what they feel like their role is. Can you talk, what do you think about that?
Yeah, that's what people will tell you if you ask what they're doubtful about or questioning about our electoral system, is that money has an undue influence in it. And they see political leaders spending more time engaging in the process of fundraising and being engaged with those donor classes than they are really engaging with people like them. And they see that. They see it all over the place, right? And so that sense is really very acute. Now in the US, there's also layers of more process frustrations. There's frustration with redistricting. There's frustration with the bipartisan nature of American politics, that most Americans tell you that neither party really reflects their views, and yet they're offered only those two choices in any given election. And that's a source of frustration. Now, many of those are hard to fix, right? I mean, the Supreme Court has said the money issue is in the Constitution, right? It's speech. And a lot of the fundamentals of our party system are rooted in a first past the post, as the political scientists would call it. Majority rule system is often going to distill down to those two parties. But the frustration is layered. Like, to get to the bottom of all that, we as a country would have to be willing to reimagine our whole system of representation. And people want to do that. But what they're more afraid of is that the alternative would be worse. And a lot of that is very specific to the partisan divide right now. At least in the game, the rules of the game as it is today, we might lose a round, but it's kind of a stalemate. And a stalemate feels less scary than changing the rules and an uncertainty that you could even lose worse. And people are so nervous right now and fearful of the divisions in the country that the risk of changing the rules seems worse than the stalemate that we're in.
I do feel like that the latest administration, for better or worse, is changing the rules. Like the status quo has been disrupted, and I don't think it could come back very easily, certainly on a global stage, but even internally in the United States, like the federal government will not look the same as it did last year.
Yeah.
And so that is one form of disruption. I don't know that there's another path forward that's been presented other than the current one.
Yeah. I mean, and there is a lot of public frustration. Donald Trump did win a majority of the votes. There is a desire to see a shakeup of a lot of the assumptions by which our systems work, not just our political system, our economic system, our educational system, a lot of systems that people think aren't really working for them right now. So the idea of a shakeup, the idea of forcing a reckoning, so to speak, among those classes is appealing to many people. I will also say that the survey research being done just over the last 100 days or so suggests that people are a little anxious, and even some Trump supporters, that it seems to be being done without as much of a plan, perhaps, as they might have wanted, that there's a little bit more chaos than maybe they had signed up for. But I wouldn't say that the support Trump had for that kind of disruption has just gone away, or that he's taken actions that have fundamentally undermined that support.
I also feel, the money is a big part of it. I also feel like our media consumption has also played a big role in this, where we've gotten today. I know you've done some research in this area as well, but the idea of the country going home and all watching the same 3 newscasts every night has passed a long time ago, and even 500 channels has given way to millions of individual voices. And I know when I have a couple of seconds to spare, I go on Instagram and browse, and that's a completely unique experience to me, and I don't think it connects me to the larger public discourse. I mean, have you done research in this area?
Yes, right, absolutely. The fragmentation of the media ecosystem is one of the biggest trends out there. People focus a lot on what they feel like is a polarized media and more ideological media, and there is a truth to that, but it's more what you just described, that real fragmentation, that sense that you can follow this feed or that individual, and you may be getting a very different lens on what's going on, and that means all of us are constructing potentially somewhat different interpretations, at least, or even realities of what's happening in the country and in the world. And that's very interesting. I mean, again, is it worse than having a kind of monolithic media lens on things? I mean, you could have probably philosophical debates about that. It's definitely more of a challenge for democratic unity.
Yeah, I think it's harder to understand because it's something new. It's another disruption, and I imagine it's hard to research and quantify. I told you I wanted to make sure I got an AI question in here. So how are you, on a day-to-day basis, you're a research firm, you're polling, you're creating all of this data, how are you then taking AI and taking advantage of these new technologies?
Yeah. Well, it connects to the question you just asked. We're interested in how people are experiencing the world around them, how they're thinking about it, how they're reacting to it, how it's shaping their lives. And one thing AI can help us do is to actually understand that information ecosystem that people are in, even at that more individual level. So when I first started in this business, we used to do an actual deep human coding of what was on those 3 networks every night to get a sense of what was in the news. Doing that today is capturing a tiny sliver of what's actually in people's information streams. But AI, now to do it by hand, you'd have to process so much as a human being. And AI can do a great job of summarizing what's happening in all those different conversational channels and giving you that opportunity to better understand what people are absorbing, seeing, what they're turning to. So that's one very big area that it can matter a lot for just understanding that interplay between information and sort of civic engagement.
Mm-hmm. So you've been to Milken before, it's been a couple of years. Is there anything this week that you're really looking forward to seeing? Anyone that you really want to meet and talk to?
Yeah, It's always interesting. We're based in Washington, D.C., and that's not because we're a policy shop, but there's a lot of media, there's a lot of people interested in sort of civic affairs. But being here at Milken, it's a somewhat different world. The center of gravity is more around business, finance, both U.S. and global. And it just brings a different perspective to it, often a less politicized perspective. Not a lot of people are here lining up on one side or the other.
There are
They're just trying
Democrats
to
and
figure out
Republicans
how to navigate.
and business people of all stripes.
Yeah, there's a pragmatism to it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. Michael, thanks so much for taking a couple of minutes and talking to us today.
Absolutely, thank you.
That's it for now. You can find more videos like this on our YouTube channel. I'll see you there.